The most human monster, why Wrath is the closest thing to human. Among all the homunculi in Fullmetal Alchemist, there is an unspoken assumption that the more human a being appears, the more human they are. By this logic, Wrath King Bradley should be the least human of them all. He is engineered, controlled, designed for a single purpose, devoid of traditional emotional expression, and yet the deeper we analyze him, the more unsettling the truth becomes. Wrath is arguably the most human homunculus, not because he feels the most, not because he changes the most, but because he embodies something fundamental to the human condition, the ability to live fully within constraints you did not choose. Redefining humanity. What does it mean to be human? Before we can answer why Wrath is human, we must first redefine what humanity actually is. Common definitions include emotion, empathy, moral reasoning, free will, but these are incomplete because humans often act without empathy, follow imposed systems, live within constraints, lack true freedom. So perhaps humanity is not about what we have, but what we do with what we are given. And this is where Wrath becomes central. The other homunculi distorted human traits. Each homunculus represents an aspect of humanity, but in isolation. Lust represents desire, gluttony represents consumption, envy represents insecurity, pride represents superiority, sloth represents avoidance, greed represents accumulation. They are fragments, exaggerations, caricatures. Wrath, however, is different. He is not simply angry. In fact, he rarely displays anger at all. Instead, he represents something far more complex, the integration of multiple human traits into a controlled whole. Emotional minimalism, feeling without display. Wrath is often perceived as emotionless. But this is a misinterpretation. He does feel, just not in ways that are immediately visible. His emotional structure is defined by restraint, control, subtlety. Consider his calm conversations, his measured responses, his quiet reflections. These are not signs of absence, they are signs of regulation. In psychological terms, Wrath exhibits extreme emotional regulation, not emotional emptiness. And in many ways, this is more human than emotional excess. Acceptance of mortality, the most human fear. One of the defining traits of humanity is the awareness of death, not just intellectually, but existentially. Wrath is unique among the homunculi in that he is mortal. Unlike the others, he does not possess infinite regeneration. He can die, and more importantly, he knows he will. This awareness shapes his entire existence. He does not fear death in the traditional sense, but he acknowledges it, accepts it, and lives with it constantly in mind. This aligns him closely with human existential experience. To live is to move toward death. Identity without choice, a universal condition. At first glance, Wrath's lack of freedom seems to separate him from humanity. But in reality, it brings him closer because most humans do not choose where they are born, their social conditions, their early influences, their limitations. Like Wrath, they inherit a structure, a script. The difference is that humans often resist it, ignore it, deny it. Wrath does something different. He acknowledges it fully and then asks, what can I do within it? The performance of self-existence as action. This is where Wrath becomes deeply human. He cannot change his role, but he can control his performance. And so he invests everything into precision, discipline, execution. This mirrors a core human behavior, defining oneself through action rather than origin. We do not choose where we begin, but we influence how we move forward. Wrath embodies this principle to its extreme. Relationships, the subtle human connection. Perhaps the most overlooked aspect of Wrath's humanity lies in his relationships, particularly his wife and his son. These relationships are not overtly emotional, but they are not meaningless either. There are moments quiet, almost imperceptible, where Wrath demonstrates consideration, stability, presence. He plays his role not just politically but personally. This raises an important question. Is love defined by feeling or by consistency? Wrath may not express love conventionally, but he fulfills its structure, and in doing so, he creates something that resembles genuine human connection. Self-awareness. Knowing what you are. One of the highest forms of human cognition is self-awareness, the ability to recognize your limitations, your nature, your place in the world. Wrath possesses this completely. He knows he is not truly human. His life was engineered, his role was assigned, and yet he does not collapse under this realization. He does not seek to escape it, he integrates it. This is a level of psychological stability that many humans never reach. The absence of delusion, seeing without filter. Most humans rely on some form of illusion, belief in justice, faith in fairness, hope for meaning. Wrath rejects all of these. He sees the world as it is, indifferent, unjust, unstructured, and still he chooses to engage with it. This is what makes him uniquely human. because it reflects a fundamental existential challenge. Can you live fully without believing in anything beyond what exists? Wrath's answer is yes. Contrast with greed change versus consistency. He changes, he grows, and this is often seen as the hallmark of humanity, but Wrath offers a different perspective. Consistency as identity. He does not need to change because he fully understands himself from the beginning. This raises a critical question. Is humanity defined by growth or by self-understanding? Wrath suggests the latter, a human death. Wrath's death is perhaps the most human moment in the entire series. He does not transform, reveal hidden emotions, seek redemption. Instead, he reflects calmly, rationally. He acknowledges his lack of freedom, the structure of his life, the experiences he gained, and concludes that his life was worth living. This is not the conclusion of a monster. It is the conclusion of a man who has lived fully, understood himself, accepted his reality. The core truth, humanity as acceptance. At its core, Wrath represents a radical idea that humanity is not defined by freedom but by how one responds to its absence. He does not rebel, despair, escape. He accepts, and within that acceptance, he finds fulfillment. More human than humans. This leads us to the final paradox. Wrath, a constructed being, achieves something many humans do not. Complete self-awareness, acceptance of mortality, engagement with reality without illusion, fulfillment within limitation. In contrast, many humans avoid reality, seek false meaning, resist their conditions, live in dissatisfaction. So who is truly more human? The answer is not comfortable. The man who became human without being born. Wrath was never meant to be human. He was designed to be a tool, a weapon, a ruler. And yet, through experience, awareness, and acceptance, he becomes something more, not through emotion, not through rebellion, but through understanding. He does not transcend his nature, he fulfills it completely, and in doing so, he reveals a truth about humanity itself, that to be human is not to be free, but to live meaningfully within the boundaries you are given. Combat as philosophy, how Wrath fights and what it reveals. When fighting becomes language, in most action narratives, combat is spectacle, it is choreography, it is tension, it is escalation. But in Fullmetal Alchemist, and especially in the case of Wrath King Bradley, combat is something else entirely. It is expression, not of emotion, but of philosophy. Every movement Bradley makes is not just efficient, it is meaningful. His fights are not chaotic exchanges of force, they are structured demonstrations of how he sees the world. Where others fight to win, Wrath fights to affirm his existence. The fundamentals precision over power. The first thing that defines Wrath's combat style is what it lacks. No wasted motion, no excessive force, no emotional outbursts. He does not overwhelm his opponents through raw power. Instead, he dismantles them through timing and positioning, observation. This reflects his worldview perfectly, because if the world is indifferent and mechanical, then victory is not about passion. It is about execution, the ultimate eye in combat perception as dominance. Wrath's ultimate eye is often described as a tool that allows him to see everything, but in combat it represents something more abstract, the elimination of uncertainty. Where most fighters operate on prediction, instinct, reaction, Wrath operates on certainty. He does not guess where an attack will land, he knows. This transforms combat from a dynamic exchange into a controlled system. From his perspective, a fight is not chaos, it is a sequence, and he is simply moving through it. The train assault introduction through supremacy. One of Wrath's most iconic moments is his assault during the train sequence. This scene is crucial because it establishes his identity not through dialogue, but through action. What do we see? Immediate control of the environment, total awareness of threats, absolute confidence in execution. There is no hesitation, no adjustment period, no escalation. From the moment he engages, he is already in control. This reflects a key aspect of his psychology. Wrath does not enter combat, he exists in it. The tank scene, man versus machine. Perhaps the most symbolic demonstration of Wrath's philosophy is his confrontation with a tank. At a literal level, this is absurd. A human being versus military-grade machinery. And yet, Wrath wins, not through brute force, but through precision targeting, movement efficiency, tactical awareness. This scene is not about strength, it is about superiority of function. The tank represents industrial power, mechanical dominance, impersonal force. Wrath represents individual mastery, conscious control, perfect execution, and in this confrontation, the individual triumphs over the system, but not through rebellion, through optimization. Wrath versus greed, control versus adaptability. When Wrath fights greed, we see a clash between two fundamentally different combat philosophies. Greed adapts in real time and relies on defensive capabilities, expands his options. Wrath limits variables, focuses on precision. reduces the fight to essentials. Greed survives by becoming more complex. Wrath wins by becoming more simple. This is a critical insight. Because it reveals Wrath's deeper belief, complexity introduces weakness. By stripping combat down to its purest form, he removes uncertainty. Wrath versus Scar, faith against clarity. His battle with Scar is not just physical, it is ideological. Scar fights with conviction, belief, purpose. Wrath fights with awareness, control, acceptance. Scar's movements carry emotional weight. Wrath's movements carry mechanical perfection. This creates a dynamic where Scar imposes meaning onto the fight. Wrath removes meaning from it, and yet Scar begins to adapt. He becomes less rigid, less bound by belief. This is the only reason he can survive as long as he does, because to fight Wrath, you must abandon illusion. Multiple opponents, the myth of being outnumbered. One of the most telling aspects of Wrath's combat ability is how he handles multiple opponents. In most narratives, numbers matter. They create pressure, they shift balance. For Wrath, they are irrelevant because he does not perceive opponents as a group. He perceives them as a sequence of individual threats. And sequences can be ordered, managed, eliminated. This is why he appears untouchable, not because he is faster, but because he is processing the fight differently. The role of mortality, fighting with a limit. Unlike other homunculi, Wrath is mortal. He does not regenerate infinitely. Every injury matters, every mistake has consequence, and yet he fights without hesitation. This introduces a crucial psychological element. He is always fighting with stakes, but instead of creating fear, it creates focus, because when death is real, efficiency becomes essential. The final battle combat as existential expression. In his final confrontation, Wrath is no longer at full strength. He is injured, outnumbered, near the end of his life, and yet he continues to fight with the same precision, the same control, same clarity. This is critical because it shows that his combat ability is not dependent on physical condition, external advantage, situational dominance. It is rooted in something deeper, identity. He does not fight well because he is strong. He fights well because fighting is what he is. The smile in battle, enjoyment without emotion. One of the most unsettling aspects of Wrath's combat is his expression. He smiles, not out of joy, not out of madness, but out of engagement. For Wrath, combat is not suffering, it is not chaos, it is not even conflict, it is fulfillment. In battle, he is not struggling, he is complete. Combat without hatred, the purest form of violence. Wrath's fights lack one key element found in most combat narratives. Hatred. He does not rage against his enemies, seek revenge, personalize conflict. This makes his violence fundamentally different. It is not reactive, it is not emotional, it is purely functional, and in that purity it becomes more terrifying, a fighter to the end. As Wrath approaches death, his combat does not deteriorate into desperation. He does not flail, panic, lose composure, and instead he maintains his structure, his rhythm, his identity. This is the ultimate expression of his philosophy, to remain consistent even at the end. Final analysis: what Wrath's combat represents. Wrath's fighting style is not just a skill set, it is a worldview in motion, and it represents acceptance of reality, elimination of illusion, mastery of self, execution without hesitation. Every strike, every movement, every decision reflects his core belief that existence is not about meaning but about how precisely you engage with it. The man who fought as he lived, Wrath does not separate combat from identity. For him, they are the same. He lives as he fights without illusion, without excess, without regret, and he fights as he lives, precisely, completely, fully. In the end, his battles are not just victories or defeats, they are expressions of a man who understood the world and chose to meet it head-on. Why Wrath endures. There are many antagonists in fiction. Some are remembered for their power, some for their ideology, some for their emotional depth, but only a few endure because they represent something fundamental about existence itself. Wrath King Bradley is one of those rare characters, not because he is the strongest, not because he is the most complex in a traditional sense, but because he embodies a truth that is both uncomfortable and inescapable, that a life without freedom can still be lived fully. And that realization challenges something deeply rooted in how we understand meaning, identity, and humanity. A being defined not by what he lacks, but by how he operates within those limitations. Wrath does not overcome his constraints, he perfects them. The core thematic axis: acceptance versus transcendence. At the heart of Wrath's character lies a fundamental philosophical divide: acceptance versus transcendence. Other characters in Fullmetal Alchemist strive to change their fate, overcome their nature, redefine themselves. Wrath does none of this. He does not seek freedom, redemption, transformation. Instead, he accepts completely, And this acceptance is not passive, it is active, deliberate, and unwavering. Contrast with the heroes why Wrath stands apart. The protagonists of Fullmetal Alchemist, such as Edward Elric and Alphonse Elric, are defined by their refusal to accept the world as it is. They challenge systems, reject limitations, seek to restore what was lost. Their journey is one of transformation. Wrath's journey is the opposite. He does not change the world, he moves through it, and in doing so, he becomes a fixed point, a constant against which all change is measured. The unique position, a static character in a dynamic world. Most characters evolve, they grow, they change. Wrath does not, and this is precisely what makes him powerful, because in a narrative filled with transformation, he is stability. But this stability is not stagnation, it is completion. Wrath begins the story as a fully realized being. There is nothing to add, nothing to remove, nothing to fix. He is, from the beginning, exactly what he will be at the end. The philosophical impact. A character who does not argue. Many antagonists attempt to convince. They justify their actions. They present ideologies. They debate morality. Wrath does none of this. He does not try to persuade. He does not seek validation. He does not explain himself beyond what is necessary. Instead, he demonstrates through action, through consistency, through presence. His philosophy is not spoken, it is lived. The human condition, Wrath as a mirror. What makes Wrath truly powerful is not what he is, but what he reflects, because his condition is not entirely alien. Humans, like Wrath, are born into circumstances they did not choose, live within systems they did not design, face limitations they cannot escape. The difference is in response. Where many resist, deny, or struggle, Wrath accepts. And in doing so, he forces the audience to confront a difficult question. Is resistance always necessary? The duality of fulfillment. Two paths to meaning. Across the narrative, two primary paths emerge. Path 1, transformation, heroes, greed, scar, change yourself, redefine your purpose, seek meaning through growth. Path 2, acceptance, Wrath, understand your condition, operate within it, find fulfillment through execution. Neither path is presented as entirely superior, but Wrath represents the extreme end of one of them, and in doing so he gives it weight, legitimacy, presence. Wrath's death is one of the most significant moments in the series, not because of what happens but because of what does not happen, and he does not seek forgiveness, express regret, attempt to change. Instead he reflects, and in that reflection he reaches a conclusion that his life, though constructed, was worth living. This is not redemption, it is not transformation, it is something far more rare, completion. Why Wrath is unsettling? Wrath is not terrifying because he is violent, he is terrifying because he is coherent. His worldview has no contradictions, requires no justification, functions without illusion, and most importantly, it works. He lives fully, fights completely, dies without regret. This creates discomfort because it challenges a deeply held belief that meaning must come from freedom. A perfect life without choice. Wrath's existence presents a paradox that cannot be easily resolved. He has no true freedom, no self-created purpose, no moral framework, and yet he achieves fulfillment, clarity, completion. This forces a re-evaluation of what it means to live well, because if Wrath's life is valid, then perhaps freedom is not the only path to meaning. Legacy, why Wrath remains unmatched. Wrath stands among the greatest antagonists not because he dominates the narrative, but because he transcends it. He is not just part of the story, he is a lens through which the story is understood. His presence elevates every conflict, every philosophical question, every character interaction, because he represents a constant, a man who has already reached his conclusion. What Wrath ultimately is. Wrath is not a villain in the traditional sense, a monster driven by impulse, a tragic figure seeking redemption. He is something far more precise, a completed existence, a being who understands reality, accepts it, engages with it fully, without illusion, without resistance, without regret. Conclusion, the man who needed nothing more. In the end, Wrath does not ask for anything, not forgiveness, not understanding, not even recognition. Because he does not need it, he has already achieved what many strive for and never reach, a life that despite its limitations feels complete, and that is why he endures. Not as a warning, not as an ideal, but as a question that lingers long after the story ends. If you could not change your life, could you still live it fully? Wrath's answer is clear, and whether we accept it or not, it remains one of the most powerful statements in all of fiction. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like and subscribe.